So with that, let me give you an introduction of our speaker. I've known Bob for many years and consider him a friend. Bob is the principal at Liberty Common High School, serving grades 7 through 12, a charter high school and junior high in Fort Collins. How many of you have toured this school? Good. I highly recommend that any and all of you, whether you have kids, whether you're making an educational choice for your kids or not, go see this school. I have toured charter schools throughout the entire country, and public schools and private schools. And hands down, this is one of the best, if not the best, school that I have ever had the opportunity to go tour and see. I haven't seen your school yet, Derek, so maybe that'll change. Had to put that disclaimer out there. I didn't want you to get up and leave the evening. In fact, this school is ranked as Colorado's top performing high school. Not in the top, but top performing high school. They're doing something right there. Since 2003, Bob has been chairman of the leadership program of the Rockies. It's a nonprofit corporation providing economic education and civic leadership training in Colorado. I just graduated from the leadership program of the Rockies, and I also recommend that you look into that program, and we have some graduates here in the room as well. He also serves on the board of directors of the Colorado League of Charter Schools. Bob is the immediate past chairman of the Colorado State Board of Education, representing Colorado's 4th Congressional District from 2006 to 2013. From 1997 until early 2003, Bob represented Colorado's 4th Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives. Here's one of the things I love about Bob. Bob left the Congress to honor a voluntary term limit pledge he had taken when he first ran. How many of these politicians today do that? How many politicians, once they get in there, it's all about them? Maybe before they got in there, it's all about them and how they want to maintain that power. Bob voluntarily gave that up. A true servant leader. Thereafter, he became the vice president for business development at a Denver-based energy company, where he was involved in a variety of conventional and renewable energy, mining, and education projects. Bob was the Republican nominee for the United States Senate race in 2008. From 1989 to 1995, Bob owned and operated Northern Front Range Marketing and Distribution, a small marketing business serving Colorado's tourism industry. Beginning in 1987, Bob served 9 years and as an elected Colorado State Senator, where he was chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, chairman of the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, and vice chairman of the Senate Education Committee. Having just turned 25 when he was sworn in, 25, Bob was the youngest person to serve in the Colorado State Senate. Bob has an amazing family, and all of his kids have been involved in military service, serving our country. With that, help me welcome Bob to the front.
Well, thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Schaffer. I'm from Larimer County. That's code language for all the LPR graduates here. So there's a handful I see around the room. And so I start with the premise that you see on the board, on the screen right here, that public education is the single most important domestic issue confronting our country. And I really believe this, and I think that the reason we have so many problems in education today is because there aren't enough people who agree with this. But I think we absolutely have to. I'll try to prove that point over the course of the next several minutes. And I want to apologize to, what's your name? I want to apologize to Jesse. I should have brought the remote clicker here because I got a bunch of slides. I go through them fast. So carpal tunnel syndrome is in your future, I'm afraid, after tonight. So keep your thumb on the button. All right. So let's go. Next slide. So here's the agenda. Here's what I want to cover tonight. I want to introduce you to Colorado's best high school, and I want to also talk about why school choice makes sense and why markets applied to education is the best path forward. I want to talk about the history and philosophy of education itself. So we're going to talk about how America got to where it is, the philosophy that defines American schools today, the philosophy that has probably had the impact, a strong impact on most people in the room, and how that's different than a classical education that our founders, for example, and people in the first century of the country's history would have received, and why we need to get back to that today. And then we'll talk I'll brag about my school a little bit with a few facts here and there, and then we'll open it up for questions. So I've got a lot to cover. I'm going to try to talk fast. I'm going to try to keep you going through the next slide, the slides as quickly as I can. This discussion is about a revolution in education. When my kids were young, we took them to the neighborhood school. Before we did that, we called the school district and told them that we had a couple kids that were ready for kindergarten, twin girls. And they were 4.5 years old. They only had one question for me at that time when I said we were ready to go to school. Does anybody know what the question is? No. One question was, what's your address? We tell them the address that determines the school that we go to. There was no other choice. I couldn't go to a different school unless I wanted to forego my property taxes I was already paying and maybe send them to a private school. The only choice I had for the schools that I was paying for as a taxpayer was the one closest to my address. No choice. So we went there. Suffice to say, because that story is a fun one to begin with, but I just started asking questions about, well, what are our kids going to learn? I was told there was no written curriculum, that we had great teachers, they had awards, they were on the wall in the school, and if I was going to be something less than a troublemaker, I ought to pay attention to those awards because they know what they're doing and I clearly don't. And so all I needed to do was make sure I followed the sheet for parent orientation, and that was where to drop my kid off in the morning, where to pick them up in the afternoon, and what supplies to put in the backpack, and where to send the notification that the kids had all the immunizations. That's all they asked me to do as a parent, getting my kids ready for school. And when I asked questions about, all right, should they know how to cut things out with scissors by now? Should they know how to color? Should they expect them to know the alphabet? Should they be able to read a few words, spell their name? We'll take care of it. Your job is now done. We are experts. And so that got me asking questions with some people in the neighborhood. That led to meeting others. And the way I did is I read this in the newspaper in the Fort Collins, Colorado. And turns out there were some families on the north end of town who were having the same kind of frustrations with their schools. And so they were trying to look for friends. And so I went there, and it was I answered the ad, and it was just a guy in a family trying to pull some other people together to talk about the schools in town and answer a simple question, and that is, if we were to invent a great school, what would it look like? So we started, next slide, meeting in Randy Everett's living room. He and Ruth Ann, he's a urologist up in town, and so we started meeting in his living room, and we came to some of these conclusions that after reading books. There was an old bookstore in downtown Fort Collins, which isn't there now. They sell pizza there now. But we went to the Stone Lion bookstore and bought all the books on the education shelf. Probably 50 or 60 books, and we brought them back to the Everett's living room and passed them out like a poker card, a deck of cards at a poker match. You read this, you read this, you read this. So we all had our books to read, and after a series of meetings and reading lots and lots of books, we came to these conclusions: that parental choice in education mattered. The closest we can make decisions about our child's education to that child. In other words, decisions about a child's education ought to be made at the kitchen table. The further away you get away from that, the decisions tend to have less and less relevance to individual children. So we believe that parents should have choice. We believe that the core curriculum needed to have specific content. It's nice to have things written down, and they didn't in those days. We believed that you needed solid content-driven skill instruction, and we wanted to teach our kids to be leaders. Not just to teach them for a job, for a job or for training. We wanted to teach them in a way that they would be legitimate leaders in whatever they wanted to accomplish. So, skills of a democratic society: how to run meetings, how to get along with others, how to live in a community, how to care about your neighborhood, how to take care of problems in the neighborhood rather than expect some professional bureaucrat to do it for you. And we believe that the management of the school ought to be as local as possible. Next slide. So we started out, the school district, we were meeting, the meetings got bigger and bigger. We started meeting in schools. We rented school space to have these discussions, and that got the school district nervous. They saw a sitting Colorado state senator. They saw Dr. Everett's Mormon bishop. They saw a urologist in town, the Mormon bishop, and they thought, oh my goodness, these guys have constituencies and their meetings are getting bigger and bigger. They thought that this looked like a political revolution, that we were going to take over the district and run a slate, and we were going to replace them with a bunch of us, and we obviously didn't know what we were doing. in their opinion, so they got nervous. Instead, they were closing that building down, the old Washington School in Fort Collins, and there's a little asbestos issue in there and so on, but there's reasons they were closing it down. But they said, it's perfect for you people. You just take, you guys can just take your discussions and your pretend education system and all the books that you've read and you think you know what you're doing, and you can go in that school we're closing. If you'll just go there and kind of go away, you would leave us alone and you'll be happy because you will pretend to have education and we will pretend that you are too. And so we moved in, 125 students in the old Washington Core Knowledge School. That 125 students is remarkable, but the day we opened, we had another 300 in the waiting list wanting to get in. So we outgrew that building pretty quickly. Next slide. And about that time, Fort Collins High School was moving out of its life. If you've ever been to Fort Collins on College Avenue, there's this iconic, beautiful building right on College Avenue. It was the original Fort Collins High School, the first high school dedicated to the city that was built in town. We moved into the whole south half of it. The Fort Collins High School moved to the new mega campus that they're in now. We moved into the whole south half. We had about 400 kids there and about 800 on the waiting list at this point in time. This sent shockwaves throughout the district. And the shockwaves were not what you would expect. Had nothing to do with academics. It had nothing to do with the fact that we were teaching kids something different. It had nothing to do with the fact that parents, had different preferences of what they wanted. The concern that the district had was really defines everything that's wrong with too many public school systems, and that was this. Every elementary school principal around Fort Collins knew they had about $200,000 to $300,000 worth of customers that wanted to leave their building and come to mine. That's all they cared about. So they did what they do in government land all the time. They circled the wagons and they decided we got to find problems over there because there's certainly some to find if we just look hard enough. And they started making demands on us that were costing us in terms of our education product and delivery system. For example, we had food brought. We didn't make food. We didn't have a commercial kitchen there, so they would bring lunch to us in a truck that they made us buy. Never mind that the truck then went to 5 or 6 other schools to deliver food, but we had to pay for it. So we had to buy this expensive truck that wasn't on our budget. They were assigning excess capacity teachers. It's a term in education. Those of you who are in it know this term. Excess capacity teachers means that you have more teachers than you have positions, and these are people you can't fire because they've got a union tenure contract. And so unless they molest a child or ask a 15-year-old out on a date, you can't get rid of them. And so they assigned them to us. And these are typically older teachers who have a year or 2 or 3 till they retire, and they had no interest in learning about our curriculum. We use the core knowledge curriculum. We'll get that in a minute. No interest in that. It was really hurting our education, our educational product. So I was in the state senate still then in 1995, and about that year we passed the charter school law in Colorado. I was a co-sponsor of it. That gave us options. Next slide, please. So we decided to create a charter school. We bought that toothpaste factory right there in an industrial area, and Don's company turned the toothpaste factory into a school, the Neenan company, and so it still smelled like toothpaste and mouthwash for a few years. And it made kids feel like they were visiting the dentist, but we converted that into a great school. Kindergarten through 9th grade at that school. Half of our families that were on that 400 in the Washington Core Knowledge School, plus another 800 on a waiting list. The district tried to get us not to charter because they thought that was really a threat to the community, and it was an epic fight, by the way. We were the very first organization to apply for a charter under the charter school law. It took us over 2 years, and the district actually sued us as parents in this process. We're still mad about that, by the way. And they actually sued us, and then so we ended up being the 3rd charter school approved in the state. So and then they were building a neighborhood school for a neighborhood. It was in part of their long-term expansion plan for the district, and they decided, well, we'll take that school away from that neighborhood and we'll give it to these these people talking about charters, and they'll want that instead of having to do this. We had enough families in the school and on the waiting list that we could do both. So our families kind of split into my family and I, we moved to the Washington Core Knowledge School. We moved to Liberty Common School, which is the brand new charter. Next slide. The rest of the families moved to that school, which is the neighborhood school that the neighborhood doesn't get to go to. It's now a Core Knowledge School as well. It's a school of choice in Fort Collins. So that's a sister school of ours. Comes from the same place. They teach the same curriculum. We work with them. We regard ourselves as sister schools. We're better, but it's a good bet. If you can't get into Liberty, get on that list there, and your kids will do almost as well. So competition is good, and I'm going to prove that, and I live that every day and teach my kids. Healthy competition in school is a great thing, as a matter of fact. Next slide. So since our first year, the school has been one of the state's top performing schools, and it really is a function of the curriculum. It's a function of active and engaged parents. It's a function of having a curriculum that's written down and that you could analyze, and it allows people to make good decisions. Not everybody likes our curriculum, and if they don't go to the school. So we have a group of families there who believe in what we teach, and they reinforce it at home. And so it's not anything magical that we do at the school. It's just really common sense. Next slide. In 2001, our waiting list grew to 1,800 families wanting to get in that toothpaste factory. And so they were mad. We'd have the public info meetings, and the parents would come, and they'd say, "Why are you telling us about your school when we're not going to be able to get in?" And so we said, well, that's a real problem that we've got. And so they were screaming at us, "Well, make a bigger school so that we can all get into your school." And our answer was no. Part of the success that we've enjoyed at the school was actually the school size. It's a great thing when the principal knows the names of all the kids, and when little Johnny's having an issue with math or science, let's say, it's great when you have the meeting in the front office with the teachers and some administrators and maybe special ed teachers. It's a really cool thing when everybody around the table knows a little bit about the family, and if there's something else going on, or maybe we know, maybe there's other aspects of that kid's life that's affecting them in the classroom. The school gets too big, you don't know those stories, and you don't know those kids. So our goal was not to grow, and so we instead said, hey, our school and our policies and procedures and our everything we've done to create a charter, it's an open book. It's all there on the website. You can steal it, just like Derek did to start his school. And well, don't laugh about that. They came up for a visit, and we said, here's how we help. There's lots of Liberty kind of clones. I mean, they're not exact clones. They've got their own flavor. They've got their own variations on the curriculum, but that's our contribution here. That's probably why I've been invited, is because we hold ourselves up as a great model. The test scores certainly help in that regard. I got a steady stream of people coming through the school all the time wanting to know how it is, what we do, and then finally they say, well, how do you write this policy or that policy? It's not a problem. Go to the website and steal it. It's all there. Just take it. And we put all of our curriculum maps. Everything's there. We own nothing, and we don't believe we should in a public school. So any one of you want to start a charter school, go to libertycommonschool.org and just start going through the documents, download them, take Liberty out, put your name of your new school in, and shazam, you're going to have a great school. So just like Ridgeview did. Now they're pretty good. Ridgeview's a great school. My son went to Ridgeview. We were still a K-9 school at this time. They started a high school. My son Justin went through Liberty, and then after 9th grade went to Ridgeview. It's a great school. We're better. It's a great school, and it's a great school. If you can't get into Liberty and you're on our waiting list, you want to get on the Ridgeview or the Trout website or waiting list as well up in Fort Collins, and you'll get almost as good education at those two schools. You'll get a great education, really, especially there. This is a fantastic school, despite their scores being slightly behind ours. But all right, all right. Next slide. Okay, so there's where I work now. We bought a second campus. That's about a mile from the toothpaste factory. We started a high school. We added 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, so we moved our 7th through 10th grade over to this building. It was owned by a previous charter school that went belly up, and that sat vacant for about 4 years, and so the price was right. The bondholders who got stuck with it heard we were going to build a high school, and so the price just kept coming down until we took it. And so that allowed us not only to move over, but we moved grade 7 through 12 over into this building, and we've been expanding and adding on to it since. We're going to add a gym down there where that bus is right now, starting in January, and Don's company is going to build that too. And then we're that allowed us to expand from 60 kids per grade to 90 kids per grade over at the elementary school. So we're about as big as we're going to get. Next slide.